Click.
Yep. And then as soon as it hits 10, I will start the webinar and mute myself. And Shannon, you should mute too. I see that you're not muted.
Yep. Just wanted to say good luck.
Oh yes, sorry. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you.
And so once she starts the camera, I'll count till 5 and I'll go into this first slide. Just so you have timing.
Okay, I'm starting the webinar now.
Hello, and welcome to Foray's Business as Unusual webinar series. Just a quick housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on our site at forays.org/webinar series Business as Unusual. We'll also be taking questions during the webinar, so please use the QA feature on the Zoom screen toolbar to add your questions for the panelists. And now I am quickly going to introduce to you Phil Schraeder, who is going to take you through the webinar, who's going to moderate this webinar and be our conductor. Phil is the CEO of GumGum. He is a seasoned media industry executive and recognized thought leader in the digital advertising and programmatic technology space. As the CEO of GumGum, Schraeder is responsible for GumGum's success in revolutionizing the digital media industry. He's a regular contributor to Adweek, AdExchanger, Fortune, and 2017 Los Angeles Business Journal CFO of the Year award honoree, which I have to say, Phil, is incredible that you got an award for being the CFO and now you're the CEO. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over the webinar to you to pick it up from here.
Thank you so much, Aswini. Really appreciate it. So excited to be here. And I also want to make sure before I even go any further, I introduce two of the really important industry veterans that are helping us to transform our future of our digital industry that's going to join me today. After I walk through, just a very big, I think, overview of what we think about how we need to be facing a cookieless and an audience-free world. I'm going to have Akash Jareth. Jareth, if I said your name correctly, from Dentsu. He is the Chief Product Officer at Dentsu, and he is a seasoned veteran. He comes having worked at Merkle, having worked at Programmatic and Accordant, and he's really covered a lot of both offline and online worlds of all addressable consumer engagement. So I think a perfect addition to kind of give us his view and perspective on the cookies, as well as he's been able to look at how research and development and all of that fosters innovation and helping to bring media together in things like the CRM that empowers Dentsu, and as well as using that to help really continue to increase their value-based products to their advertisers. He's most recently developed Dentsu's contextual intelligence product in the US, which we're so happy to see it making such good waves across the industry in a way to really help the brands start to understand how this changing identity landscape can now be leading them, in a more future forward global effort. Interestingly about Akash, you should know that we just found out on the call, he's writing a historical fiction play, which I thought was really super cool. So we just wanted to also give you a little bit of a sprinkle about something fun for him. And then the other person that's joining me is Ivy Chung. She's the VP of Group Partner Integrated Investment at She has over 10 years of digital media experience across multiple verticals, from automotive to pharma. She has interest in staying up to date on all things that are changing in the digital landscape. And her background in digital has her as referencing just an integrated buyer, being a buyer across media and linear, and then digital and streaming. So has seen the full gamut. And Ivy's been at for the past 5 years and is currently working on the BMW business. So welcome, Akash, welcome, Ivy. I'll dive in, and then I look forward to having you guys back for a chat. And hopefully we can dig a little bit deeper on providing some tools, thoughts, and a way for, I think, the audience to see a new future that's coming our way. So what I thought I would do, and I thought would be helpful, is really, I think what we take a step back is the business that we're in, digital business, digital marketing, digital just in general, has really gone really far into knowing a lot about who we are. And so I think the first thing we have to do is really understand, what do we believe the future of advertising is going to be key? What's going to be the tenet? And we believe the tenet will be around understanding a consumer's mindset and where they are, not anything about their personal data. So not only are we embarking on a whole new way in which we have to think as an advertiser how to reach our target person or consumer in digital environments, in new ways, we kind of have to break apart and be okay with some of the things we became so used to, and really decouple and really break down what we've done. So we have not only work to do in building, we have work to be in bringing down the walls that we've built up. And so when you look at what you're going to build a foundation on, for us, it's really, what is the goal of advertising? And the goal of advertising isn't to try to gain as much information about a person, isn't to try to understand their habits, isn't about trying to maximize their ability to give you the outcome or the desire you want. But really, it's simple. It's, how do I connect the value of me as a brand, stand out amongst everything else, and make you feel that I'm providing you what it is that is important to you, what you are looking for, what you need. And how do I do that in a way that is respectful, that is thoughtful, and then as an industry is future-proof for us to build as a foundation as these continued new merging digital environments come out. And that's where we think, for us, contextual or looking at alternative solutions is really important. And it's not just important because we've got personal data and cookies going away and we need to figure out another solution. It's important because our habits are changing every day. Not right now, fun fact about me, I'm in like 8 countries in like 9 days. And so I'm not on my Peloton that I normally would be in the morning. But as you think about your every day and where we're going, it's waking up on your Peloton, going to your smart screen in your kitchen, getting on your phone, looking at your smart TV. Maybe you're going to dive into a virtual game or VR. And so what's actually happening is we're not even realizing the emergence of these fast-paced digital environments that are taking us on a journey with them. But in joining that journey of our future, it's not allowing us for disruptiveness. And it's not allowing us to really look and have access to a lot of information about who we are. And so we need to start looking at, what can technology do with all of these emerging digital environments that are going to be so unique, that are going to put you in a unique mindset, going so fast, and knowing we don't have digital data. So for me, we have to start now on how we're building a foundation of reaching our target consumers with a completely simplistic, back to basics, but I think very complex view. And I would imagine anyone on this call isn't going to argue with the fact that the current ads and the overall way in which we're tracking things just aren't effective. I mean, we've started the technology by using audiences, and then we built an approach that once we realized we could get a little bit of that data, we just took as much as we could and we just focused on that outcome. And I think when we take a step back and we focus on that outcome, we're really losing sight of the person, right? Browsing and following me around when I might have looked for a baby gift, but I'm struggling to have a baby myself, and still following me around after I bought that for someone, just because you think that I'm potentially going to be a new parent, isn't not only not putting me in the mindset of the frame of mind of what I'm on or what I'm reading at that time, if I'm engaging in sports content or something else, you're reminding me of things that I don't want to be reminded about. I'm in a mindset and I'm in a journey, whether it's I'm in gaming, I'm reading a web page, I'm consuming entertainment content, and we need to put that first. And so we need to take apart all of these things that we've said are ways to measure effectiveness. We've built viewability and we've built CTR and we've built things that are just so driven to a measured saying that that ad, something happened and it was there. And that gives me comfort it worked. And we know that that's not the case. We know that we are battling for attention on every single digital device. We know that all the generations now know exactly when a TV commercial is going to come in, they move to a different device. I watch my nephews have multiple tablets, their brothers go from one to another. They know how to avoid, and they're expecting us as an industry to provide them advertising that fits their need at the time that they're in with the privacy, and doing it in an authentic and really truly connective way. And so why do we keep serving the same ad? I just bought those shoes. Why are we watching that the next day? You searched for that a week ago. It's like looking for alcohol, and then in the morning you're looking for a gym class and serving you an alcohol brand. That was last night. That's not who I am today. I'm not retiring. I'm only in my 30s. Why am I getting home ads that make absolutely no sense when I'm in none of that content? And like I mentioned, the baby ads, I don't even have children, but maybe I looked for a gift and now it's just consuming and flooding me. And it's really giving me a really awful taste in what I'm seeing around advertising because I just feel it's too creepy. You combine all of that with knowing that half of users avoid online ads. You know, there was a recent study that said we're exposed to 10,000 ads a day just in all of our world, both digital and around us. So how do you stand out? How do you truly make a difference? How do you really think about simplifying and going back to the premise that we just want to focus on how we bring and reach you and connect with you at a moment in time that's correct and that works for your mindset? So if we all just take a deep breath and say, okay, we've built this business, we've built this industry on data and it's falling apart. We have to figure out a solution. So let's just go back to what we know and what we believe the real core concepts are, which is if we can use technology to truly understand the digital environments we're in, contextual technology that can look at, and not just based on what we know in text or keywords, but look at the screen, know what we're engaged in, know what type of device we're on and where we are and where that content is coming from. And let's create that and take action around using technologies like contextual technologies that pull in the text and the images and the audio. Bring you to the mindset first of what I am doing at that moment. If I'm reading about sports and I'm catching up on the sports and I'm reading about my favorite team, how are you using that information around that to create an effective creative, an ad, something that stands out to me and that makes sense for the environment that I'm in? So at the end of the day, we need to solve for all of these emerging areas. And so we need to start to measure and think about how are we getting to attention? How are we grabbing ultimately the attention of the consumer? We've got our contextual understanding of environment. We have that technology. GumGum has that technology. We have creatives that we've been using in all of these different digital environments that have been working. And now we want to make sure how do we stand out? How do we make that creative and focus on that attention? Those three things to us are what we call the mindset matrix. And if we as an industry focus on three key tenets of the contextual, the right environment, understanding our goal is how do I grab your attention and understand what is driving the attention and use that to build creative that's magical and special and that gives me as a user what I know that you want me to know about your brand and that's helping me make a decision in that mindset. And for us, the perfect experience is stepping into a digital environment and the environment immediately in real time knows what's going on, finds the right spot, understands how to put the creative and put it together in a moment in time that's been given direction by the brand to garner and grab the most attention. And start using those creatives and those contextual scenes together, understanding, and hey, I'm saying that this content is all about urban music, and I think this ad is about urban music. Is that a match to garner the most attention? Oh, wait, no, maybe not, but there's another thing about this content. It's about celebrity. Hey, this ad has celebrity. That garners a lot of attention. And it's all based on first understanding what are we trying to put together when we're going to put something in front of our consumer. And if we look at these three key tenets, I believe you're building a foundation that you will not have to tear down later. It's a foundation that if you think about whether you're bullish on the metaverse or not, VR and that world is coming. And these solutions with these concepts allows you to start to tackle the not just web pages, but CTV, looking at frame by frame and being able to serve ads, looking at in-game and finding the right in-game moment of content that makes sense. So while I'm playing, there's an opportunity for an ad. While I'm in CTV content, I'm seeing an opportunity for an ad that's based on that without disrupting me, without stopping me. And that, we believe, is also the start of the metaverse. It's the start of understanding where are going to be the opportunities that a brand is going to be able to say, I'm in this environment, find it, put it on the placement of the wall, and really not interrupt, but add value. And we think those are going to be the key combination. And data and personal data, although can be a part, doesn't have to be. And we've been able to show for us that you can be effective with contextual. You can be effective with the ability to look at other solutions outside of just the audience data. So as an industry, how we look at this, we're a bunch of smart people. And if we look at these tenets and we think to ourselves, I need to be ready to have my brand in these new environments. And I have to be ready to have my brand in these environments, leveraging technologies that are going to be really the only ones really at this point that I can start testing and learning to help me into that next ability to serve and reach consumers in these digital environments like context, then we're already missing out on this opportunity with the cookies going away next year. So really, we want to dive a little deeper with Akash and Ivy and talk a little bit about now with this just big movement away towards cookies. Yes, we're rushing because we're being forced to, but how are we not just rushing to an immediate solution, but rushing on one that we believe is a foundation we can build off of and start to build into this contextual world as a key primary driver of ultimate success in any digital activation. We just don't see how it's going to ever be a successful digital campaign without knowing contextually what is going on in the space. And then really thinking, how do I just get back to getting their attention? And then I have the fun creatives to do it in unique ways in all of these different environments. And hopefully at that time, I'm sure Akash and Ivy would love it if all that could be optimized for perfect performance at one point solution across all those digital environments. But we still have work to do on all of that. So with that, I would like to just welcome back Akash and Ivy back and get some thoughts. So how did you think that went, Akash? Anything takeaways from that you'd like to address or your thoughts?
Yeah, that was great. Super engaging. I think so much alignment there. The one thing that I'll add is I think you had the matrix with context, creative, and attention. We're heavily focused on attention. More and more of our KPIs are sort of attention centric. So that's huge. In terms of the way that we've been thinking about it is under the kind of the addressable umbrella, and context being one form of addressability, right? It's not identity-based addressable, right, but it is context addressable. So you still want to go after real people, and you want to go after real people that are in the right moment. And so, I think as audience-centric and data-centric capabilities have gotten maturity over the years, and maybe too much maturity, I think what we're doing is we've been missing the kind of the contextual side, and now we're kind of seeing the elevation of that sophistication. So they kind of play hand in hand to make sure that people don't sort of think of it as, hey, we're turning off one and going to the other, but we're really kind of bringing them together to make it that much more powerful.
Yeah, great. Makes a lot of sense. I think you do want to look at it as addressable, right? Because you do want to just try to make sure that you're thinking about how it does matter to whoever is on the other side. So I think that's a good lens. And then you can look at in addressability, how are you thinking about other data inputs, personal data, the right person that you can maybe add to your matrix at Dentsu, right? You guys are building your contextual engine. So you're going to take advantage of everything you have, which makes sense, but at least it's great. And I know we've done some great work with the testing of contextuals, its ability to stand alone on itself, right? And just be able to compete and have its own play in driving efficiencies. And the same thing, with Ivy as well. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. And, we did a recent study with, Magna on the ability to look at just contextual alignment and relevance within CTV. And we saw just really awesome results there. So I'm curious as to how you are, contextual and some of the things I brought up today and just kind of your perspective.
Yeah, I think it's extremely important that, we as advertisers know, and we're fully aware that we can't use third-party cookies anymore. We can't rely on them because it's not going to be an option anytime soon. So it's really, making sure that we're looking at different ways to target whether it be contextual targeting, adding in other different data points that we have access to so that we can deliver the best results, for each individual client, each individual advertiser. And we can't just rely on one solution. There are going to be multiple solutions out there, and we have to know which ones work better for one advertiser versus another. And like what Akash was saying, we can't we're not using contextual targeting to replace all other forms of advertising. It should be a complement. So we should use contextual targeting maybe as a base, but then also add in other data points that we may have access to so that we can serve a much more personalized, much more relevant ad. Are we serving an individual on the Peloton? An ad on the Peloton, you'll want to serve a different message than maybe something on your mobile device.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Sorry, to
Go ahead.
quickly add to that. One of the things I love in terms of adding data, kind of your baseline adding, is using as much of sort of first party sort of publisher data, because in a sense that's contextually relevant too, right? So it's kind of a mix,
Yeah,
I was going to. Yeah, go ahead, Ivy. Yes.
Yeah, and it's like, if it's either first party data with advertisers, advertisers first party CRM data, or like Akash was saying, publisher data, because there's a lot of robust data out there. We don't need to rely on cookies anymore. And I think it's time that we start thinking about other ways to target outside of just cookies.
Yes. And I think that's a good segue, Ivy, into I think some of when we have like panels, or I've been on, such sessions like this, I always try to think, how do we, really provide and level set with anyone who's listening or watching what's available, right? So we talk about this right now. So for me, what we've been doing, both with, which was great with, Akash and the Dentsu team, and then with Ivy and the Magnin team, is how do we start to look at what is available today for people to look at, and how do we start to empower agencies and brands to test? And so right now, when we look at, say, GumGum's solution, right, people don't realize that we've been packaging that up with these amazing creatives, like we've started in attention, right? But we want to bring this philosophy to the market. And so we've packaged up our contextual data in an API. And what that has allowed, and I'd love, from what that's allowed us to do, like we published a study with you, Akash, on Dentsu, right? Where we ran our contextual technology that, just so that everyone is aware, is the first MRC accredited content level technology, meaning it uses images and audio and text all together in web pages and video, et cetera, to just use it and say, how can this stack up against behavioral, just when you're actually looking at it? So I don't know, Akash, like if you have, but what we saw was that, the ability for contextual when it's accurate, which, based on all those signals, proud to say you guys said we were the most accurate. So thank you for that. You ran that. But then when you're accurate by looking at all of those and you're relevant, we did see cost efficiency, right? And engagement, right? I mean, we did see that you were able to deliver that. And I think we used 4 different brands, and you just kind of said, hey, let's try to use contextual against their target audience without, and see how we do. And so is that how Dentsu's really sinking their teeth into staying at the forefront, right? Like, how are you looking at partners and taking what's available and testing and bringing it to your brands?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was good success. I think an important part of that, and again, back to kind of attention, the important part of that is measuring the right type of sort of response, right? And so, there may be some sort of limited ability of measurement that was tied into the kinds of tactics. And I think as we're evolving as an industry, we're recognizing that, look, you're bombarded with ads. So finding an ad that can get your attention, can keep your attention, really has an impact. And that goes hand in hand with the kind of evolution and sophistication that we did with GumGum and the tests. So I think that's kind of a package deal to understand that. If you're looking for CTR, maybe that's not the same thing. So right. it's hopefully they kind of go together. So that's definitely a piece of it, is tactics evolving with measurement strategies. And then you're right, like people were worried, at one time that death of cookies is moving to contextual, which is going backwards. And I think the amount of work that's been done over the time, and GumGum's leader in this, the level of sophistication, the data science behind it, the NLP behind it, the ability to kind of understand that content, whether it's text or visual or video, that has really brought this to a level that becomes really, really fine-tuned and want to kind of bring in all the aspects. So that's absolutely great. I think the more the clients are seeing this, advertisers are seeing this, they're getting excited about it. Some are, I think, ahead of the curve and are kind of proactively testing it. Some, I think, are saying, look, I'm going to get value as much as I can from my already set plans, but yes, I'm willing and open. So at various points of that curve, but I think everyone's getting there.
Yeah, that's great. And I would say, Ivy, the same with Magna and your team, really, and you moving forward and really wanting to test this, because we took this a little step further with another study where we looked at contextual within an ad experience within CTV specifically. And that was really interesting data to see that, users and the adoption of a different creative with contextual alignment and how they can be exposed and what they were, more apt to seeing and how they felt it was more effective was also really interesting. I was wondering if you wanted to talk a little bit about that, study or your approach, or how you think about testing and looking at bringing this to your brands, as trying to be as early as possible.
Yeah, sure. I think, it's definitely important to note that I think most of us know that if you're placing an ad in contextually relevant environments and contextually relevant mindsets, you're going to deliver more. You'll be able to deliver stronger results, stronger engagement metrics. It may not necessarily translate to maybe like more cost efficient, but you'll see higher engagement rates and recall. So what we did with GumGum, we wanted to test mindset versus just targeting. And we saw pretty positive lifts across four different categories. Ads were more memorable, more effective at reaching the right audience, and also increases in favorability, search intent, recommendation intent. And so positive results all across the board. And I think that's extremely important because we knew this, and just having the metrics behind contextually targeting the right mindset users when they are in the right environment will deliver strong results.
Yeah, and starting to do that and seeing it's consistent in new emerging spaces like CTV, as everyone's trying to figure out, right? Because if we look at, let's take CTV, for example, when we think about contextual, we think of it, yes, how do we use it to target, right? And how do we use it to find the right environment or to create the right suitable or safe environment, however you want to use that technology to really start from there. But we also know there's just limitations on CTV measurement, the ability to, a lot of what we've become accustomed to also. So you have a cookie going away, you have frequency, you have so many different things. And so all of this is kind of coming at you. And then on top of that, we have to think about the creative element within these spaces. So Ivy, I'll go back to you. When you think about the look and feel of just creatives now and just the process, how do you view the future of just looking at the, say, contextual or any other data to create that creative and have more influence versus it being created off of just, say, a standard brief that was traditionally how we've maybe established what our assets were going to be for a campaign? Curious as to how do you see that potentially process evolving as, data and real-time access can be immediately influential into, say, even a creative experience at a specific moment?
Yeah, sure. So we know that CTV is important to us. There are a lot of users who have cut the cord now. So we need to find individuals in new ways, and CTV is one of the ways. We can easily right now, if we wanted to, buy content based off of what indexes against our audience. We can even place our ads post-production, so virtually into different content. But I don't think that's enough. What we really want to do is use technology, use contextual intelligence so that we can match the mood of the scene and then also serve an ad immediately following so that it can really resonate with the message and with what a viewer may have just seen. So What that means is, let's just say like there's a scene that a user is watching, really positive, high energy, exciting, happy and positive vibes while someone's driving a car. Immediately following that, we will serve an ad that, serve an auto brand message so that auto brand can be associated with happy, fun, exciting driving experience. So I think, as contextual intelligence evolves, there will be more opportunities for us to really align with the content that a user may have just viewed.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting view. And I think it's smart, because I believe the reason I think that's smart is as a strategy, because it allows you to build off of a moment and a mindset of like an emotion, right? But you also then, as creative starts to become more real-time understanding of contextual, it allows the brands to also, I think, represent what they stand for in different parts of the way, in different issues in society, right? Like, how do you send that message of thoughtfulness or concern, right? In an environment where, instead of, I'm going to block running away from, say, a social issue, or I want to run away from this because I'm afraid this is going to be too brand unsafe. How do I capture that moment and have it be a part of a way a brand can use that context to create a connection to their consumer about their point of view? So curious, Akash, do you share or see that as like maybe the really kind of a future way in which we're going, where the contextual can have that influence into creative, and then, to Ivy's point, be a mechanism that then can in turn help build, kind of a future visual storyboard of how you as a consumer are going to interact with that brand across the different content you're consuming in different digital environments? How do you see that? Do you see a similar view?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how it couldn't be that way. I think creative, as we start to think about less of it being advertising and more consumer engagement, there are various forms of engagement. And each one has to be very specific and relevant to that environment, that mood, where the consumers are in their journey. So you have to think about the entire kind of end-to-end journey. And creative inherently, while targeting and measurement and performance is a little bit sort of analytical and data-driven, creative inherently has such a larger qualitative aspect.
Yes.
You mentioned kind of that emotional connection, like that becomes so much more important. And it does, of course, drive all the metrics in the math as well. But that can change your experience, change how you think about the brand, whether you find them as a partner, a brand that's supporting you, or intrusively. It varies so much that I think it becomes key to make sure that you're mapping your experience that a consumer has with the mindset they're in.
Great. And I think off of that, I think we've both, and you touched on it a little bit, Akash, just on attention. Now attention is becoming such a hot topic, right? And I think I use that stat, 10,000 ads we see every day. And when you actually start to, and if you're all in our space, you do notice, you're like, that's kind of an ad, that's an ad, that's an ad. You're like constantly, overwhelmed. And so attention is getting this kind of being brought to the forefront as really like, why have we gone so far down a rabbit hole into trying to just say something was on the screen or that was there, that means it resonated or worked, right? And trying to figure out a way to translate that into an attribution model that gives us the rational justification for our digital media activation. And so, curious, Akash, as you look at attention and think about it, there's so much still unknown around what's going to be defined, what's going to be, how we can track it, how you can lean in. And so how is Dentsu approaching like the attention just economy and its thoughtfulness around that as part of, its strategy, going forward?
Yeah, attention is at the heart of our strategy across various aspects. Attention economy actually is one of our key initiatives, and Dentsu's kind of been leader on this. It's always a challenge to change an industry mindset. A few years ago, we had kind of viewability come in. That was maybe kind of the early stages or early versions or early proxies. And initially it was hard. It was hard for individual partners to be able to say, look, this is a valid measure because it has business impact. You need to take it seriously. You start factoring it in. It slowly got momentum, and then it became pretty dominant, and now it's everywhere. So attention kind of is in that same phase where it's starting to change what it means. I also think that as we were very audience centric, the one metric that spanned across media types, both digital and non, was reach. And I think as we're kind of going from that to being, it's not going to be as sort of identity focus. It's going to have to be engagement, and attention is really that, right? So I think there are going to be more and more studies that map sort of what level of attention will lead to what level of results by verticals, by business categories, and then by more specific advertisers. So all that I think is to come. There's great work happening. We're working with partners across the world with different levels of measurement. Everything from understanding small panelists with really closely tied attention measurement, as well as kind of more simple measurement, but more broad. So it's really trying to define that new standard and hopefully ultimately tying it to business value for various advertisers.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to me when I think back of our history. It's kind of like, remember when everyone was running programmatic ads, and then we realized they were below the fold, and what was I buying? Nothing was in view. And then we grabbed a viewability metric and we said, okay, now 70%, like we came up with what was acceptable measures of viewability acceptance. We ran a campaign and we started to establish those, and then we're like, well, wait a minute, now everyone's walking away from the screen and no one's even watching it. And even though, right? So it's like, we're kind of just going back to like getting just a little bit more granular. And now, advertisers saying, well, viewability or age, all of us, like, that's just not enough of a proxy. It's good for what we have. Like, let's don't get it wrong. It's a step in just, hey, at least we know there was an opportunity for our ad to be seen. But now, how do we really know we got the attention from that ad? So, Ivy, how do you see it? Do you see a similar kind of view on attention? And are you seeing that kind of play out in the conversations you and your team are having with brands, and how you guys are getting behind it and thinking about it?
Yep, definitely. So, just going back to viewability, like you were saying, just because it was above the fold, does it mean that someone actually saw the ad? Because someone could have moved away from their computer, moved away from their device. So we have to take it a step further. Just because something was in view for, based off of IAB's, definition of for 2 seconds, at least 50% of the ad was in view for 2 seconds. It doesn't necessarily mean that they saw the ad. It doesn't necessarily mean that they will remember the ad or that they'll eventually take action. So for us, I think it's important that we're looking at metrics that are in more real time. So we're able to optimize in real time, like what is working. So maybe we want a user to visit to actually engage with the ad if it's a high impact unit with different touch points, and we want a user to learn more about the individual product that we want to measure, that we want to promote. We'll look at engagement rates, engagements with that ad. Maybe we want something more lower funnel, so we're driving a user to our site and getting a sign up. So those things are much more actionable in real time. But then memorability, how much does an ad make a difference and advertising make a difference for the consumer? How much do they how likely will they be to consider our brand, to recommend the brand, and do they even remember the ads that they saw? We talked about it, or Phil, you mentioned we see maybe 10,000 ads a day. So like, of all of the 10,000 ads, like which ones do we actually remember? So it's really important that we have brand lift study measurements in place so that we can measure like how memorable, how effective was our ad campaign.
Yes, agree. And I think that, because I think I think sometimes we talk and we realize, like you mentioned, the people are walking away from a device, Ivy, right? And we realize that's been happening, but yet we just have been so fixated on what we have as a solution. So it's nice that we just have to step back. And I think we're all seeing that we need to think differently. And before we dive into some of the questions, because we're getting great questions and want to definitely engage with the audience, and thanks everyone for listening and being a part of this with us today. one of the key trends I can just kind of see in some of the trend is just how is just the data conversations going with brands, right? When we talk to many different clients, right? One client's going to be like, we're never going to touch first party data. We don't want to know anything. We're going to just kind of always operate in a black box. You have others that are, no, we want to build our first party data segment. It's critical. We want to go deeper and bigger, and we want to leverage it more. What are you seeing in trying to navigate those conversations, and have those conversations evolved with knowing that the cookie's going away? So are you seeing brands want to dive deeper into their first party or stay away and look at alternatives? Curious, Akash, just themes, or is it really that varied by advertiser or vertical?
It does vary by advertiser vertical to some extent. That said, I think the advertiser that has the capability where they do have that direct engagement with the consumer, whether it's the automotive market, or whether it's kind of an e-commerce market, so whether it's digital or offline, but where they have that direct, CPG is a little bit harder, right? I think they do want to build first party relationships, because it's not just about, sending an ad and getting a response. It's really about building that relationship. And I think when you do it, when our advertisers have been doing it in a way that's sort of transparent, it's privacy safe, they're respecting the consumer, and they're actually saying, look, if you engage with us, we're actually going to provide you value. That's ultimately important. So as long as they can demonstrate that, I think they've been getting good engagement from consumers as well. So that's such a treasure trove of data. No matter how you end up doing your targeting and messaging, the first step is understand who your audience are, right? People do it with panels, and that I don't think is going to go away. But I think as much as you can have that direct, real engagement with actual customers, it's a huge win.
Yes. Great. Ivy, how do you see that?
Yeah, I would just, I would agree with what Akash said, but also just to build on what he was saying about, first party data, advertiser first party data. I think not only, is it showing that, we value, but it's also helping build that brand loyalty. So you don't want to, if you have consumers who are buying your product, you want to make sure that you're speaking to them more, bringing them back, building that brand loyalty, so that they won't go to one of your competitors. Like you don't spend all of your time advertising to an individual. You don't spend all of your time. You don't want to spend all of your dollars advertising to an individual, and then finally get them to buy your product, and then decide, what, like, we found you, we don't need to message you anymore. Like we don't. That's the last thing that we want to do. But there are also instances where advertisers can't collect first party data. So then you'll need to find different ways, so if it's, pharma, and there are like health, privacy's laws in place where we can't target based off of different conditions than that an individual may have. So at that time, then we do need to find alternative solutions to targeting, so that we're reaching that user in the right environment.
Yeah, I think different advertisers are going to have different limitations, and I do think that you want to stay as connected to your consumer once you have them as a consumer, right? So how do you build off of making sure they're aware of new products and new capabilities of maybe an existing product? So I think that's really, I agree. You don't want to lose the traction. You spend all this money in getting that customer acquisition, right? So it's a lot easier to try to keep them to, engage and be more loyal to your brand than try to separate. And so I think if you have the data and the first party data to be able to support that, and then combine that with, I think the strategies, around the environment in which you're trying to remind them of what the value is of your product and how or what's to come, I think advertisers should definitely take advantage and be doing that, because it is just so, important asset that they have. And I think people are really realizing that. So we have 20 minutes left. And we have some questions. So I just want to kind of scroll through some of these and see what we have. So we have a question that's interesting. So, there's a question around things around like data and segments. So this question comes from someone looking to understand, for example, say financial context. And you have financial context. How do you start to understand, say, the wealth class of an individual or different things associated with them just based on the context themselves? Right? So just reading and knowing that they're investing on a piece of content alone, is that too broad reaching? And how do we start to think about that? So from our end, I think that's where these three things come into play, because you start to match, at least for my answer, and then I'll kick it over to you. But thanks for the question. How we see contextual doing it is like, we're assessing and assigning what we believe that contextual value is or what it's about. As we start to marry that with everything on what creative we're saying is also about, where are those things that are partnering together to show the most engagement? And so I think as a result, that's how you're going to drive ultimate outcomes of that engagement based on your own impact to sales and data that you'll collect as you start to engage with those consumers. So you might not be using any audience data to know, hey, what the wealth class is or their household income is. And that's where I think people ask, like, should you even have access to knowing unless I've given you permission to know? If you haven't, then I think you have to look at the contextual signals, the creative, and say, what's gaining the most attention and what's driving that audience to take the most action that you've seen from various studies or actual return on ad spend. And as that enhances, I think you're able to then set really good proxies for contextual segments that are going to align with those target demographics you're looking for, just knowing that they're going to have to in real time continue to be refreshed because they don't remain the same. And so you have to take the world and what's going on in with that, so that those contextual segments continue to maintain at the level of still hitting that target audience. That's how we would see it. I'm not sure, Ivy or Akash, if one of you have a way in which you would kind of start to think about that, or a way you'd address that question.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. So I agree with what you said. It's got to be both. I will flip the question around, not that I disagree with the question, but just to see how the audience strategies may be changing. I'm not sure what in this case the advertiser is or what the industry is, right? Is it high-end cars,
Right,
or is it large houses? Just because someone has money doesn't mean they're going to buy in high-end cars.
right.
So the question works both ways, that if you look at just one lens, it could be too broad. And we've had audience strategies so focused on sort of that audience and who the person is, which is certainly valuable. I think it's just saying we're going to add on context, messaging, and use them both. In some cases, we'll only have one, only the other, which are to some degree not perfect. It's the mix that's perfect, but obviously at scale, you're going to take both and combine to get the best of both worlds.
Well, and I think, before I kick it over to you, Ivy, the thing we have to remember is that there's still so much that has to be done that's not even done, which is things like understanding the type of content on a web page. Like, if I'm able to understand job listings for jobs that are $250,000 a year, and that's part of the content of where things are, and I can appropriately figure out the right way to engage a brand into knowing that, hey, this is job searching content and they're looking for these types, right? There's a lot of different contextual signals that have nothing to do with the person, but that are used that could help signal and then learn, hey, on this content, when there's $250,000 job opportunities, this is where we're seeing the most creatives or engagement around people wanting to explore products. And that might help you kind of gain that kind of level of segmentation and start to bring that data back into the fold of your own engine. And I think so breaking down what the content is, like, am I looking at rental listings, or am I reading an editorial page, or am I looking for a job? That matters. And that can also help signal and help you build a way to use contextual and the environment to try to nail down that audience. That's an additional complexity that I think want to make sure the audience notices, that the type of content helps if you're thoughtful around using that. Ivy, do you have anything you'd like to, how do you kind of think about that as well, just when it comes to people asking, well, now I want to reach this demographic, I want to reach, wealthy individuals, what do I do? And how do I find the right way to do that?
Yeah, I would agree with what Akash and you said, Phil. Another thing that we have to think about is someone may be reading a lot about like wealthy. They may be searching things about like wealthy content, luxury cars, high end houses. But at the same time, do they actually have the income, or are they more they're seeking that. That's the lifestyle that they are interested in, but they may not necessarily have the means for it. So what you were saying, Phil, about like looking if maybe a user is reading, on job postings and seeing, jobs that are listed with, compensation at 250K plus. Those are the ones that deliver the best results, and we do want to marry all of those. Everything together so that we can target the right way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Sorry, real quick add on. This is, I think, our industry, I think, certainly recognizes, but sometimes I've had conversations with people kind of on the periphery that don't. When you have audience-based data that says they have a certain net worth or a certain class, it often comes from aggregated contextual data of like, hey, they look expensive homes, expensive cars, and that's why they're so.
Yeah, so like exactly, it's kind of like a full circle. You just have to, like to what you said, you have to go backwards and rethink how you get to the same endpoint of why you've determined that that's the audience person, that's the person, without doing it in the way that maybe you did it. You've got to add those other signals that you need to go deeper in and spend time understanding, like the type of and then that does give you that kind of profile, I guess. That makes sense. And this is a great question too, is we hear a lot about cookieless targeting strategies, right? We have contextual and we have first party / contextual. And a question is like, how can you use those two, together, right? So I can hold my answer, but I'll kick it over to, let's say, Ivy. Why don't you give this a shot? And let's see how do you think, okay, someone's sitting here, I'm a brand, and I really want to get into contextual and I have first party data. How do you think of giving them, a strategy, and how do you help to get them there?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to think about it is, what is the first party data that we have? So is it like we can really look at first party data the same way that we look at cookies, but it's a lot more robust because we know a lot more about this individual versus we think we know this individual because of the activities that they've taken online. So we use this first party data. We know our audiences are always looking at and reading specific content. And we want to make sure that we are marrying the two, contextual and first party data together. And then we're able to, so let's say our user, the first party data that we have is a parent who, so we want to reach them when they are reading a lot of parenting content, and then the ad that we serve will be related to, will include parenting messaging.
Exactly, makes sense. And would you see the same, Akash? You see that same kind of thesis of how you're kind of approaching a brand if they're looking to try to deploy both?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've already seen results where if you look at, broadly speaking, where are my customers, what kind of content are they consuming, and you have a broad contextual strategy, that's often good, but not the best. And actually, when you break it down by your first party data of, let's say, high lifetime value versus kind of, quick, short engagements, it'll have a different contextual profile. And that helps you then craft your creative and messaging and strategy. So I think that your contextual strategy comes from understanding who your customers are, what they consume, when they consume it, and what's relevant. So it does start with first party if possible.
Yes, great.
Yeah,
Anything?
and I think
I was just gonna say, yeah, Emma, you want to add something?
Yeah, I was going to say, and then it is important that we're really targeted, but then at the same time, sometimes if we are a little bit broader, it does help because we may be able to find something that we didn't know about our first party audience. So just gaining new additional audience insights.
That's what I was going to say too. It's like sometimes you're purposeful using the first party data to then even extend broader to that exact point, Ivy. It's like you read my mind, is you get nuggets of information when you go broader to say, where is this new audience that I might be very valuable to my brand sprouting up that I didn't realize, right? To give me access and to stay at the forefront of maybe a potentially new market that I didn't think was there, or enough of a market to give me, product look at how I might be building something for a potentially new market or audience that wasn't necessarily there, and get that part of my strategy. Now, I know we only have a few minutes left, but I do know there was a couple questions just around, and I know because it's just such a hot topic and there's still so much unknown around attention. And so, I'd love to just try to give the audience some little thoughts around what do we think the measurement strategies, and how are you thinking about measurement strategies when it comes about driving attention? So for us, we've recently acquired an attention company, right? As I think maybe people know, because we view attention as, we want to use our AI panel data that we've got from our acquisition of Playground, and we want to be able to maximize from that panel understanding of eye tracking, how our creatives, when we've contextually identified a creative as being this, this, and this, how does the content that we've identified as being this, this, and this, how do the two things match? And when we start to match them, what's garnering the most attention? And so when you ask what strategies around that, it'll be things looking at the attribution of attention, I think, at least how we see it. Time in view, engagement, share of voice, how many ads are on the page. Those are the types of things that are going to have to be incorporated, we believe, to really give yourself, as an advertiser, an understanding of how much of that attention did I gain. And you scroll patterns and how much it stayed on that page when it was there. There's going to be a lot of, I think, that interactivity and engagement with creative. And so I think attention is going to have some of those attribution qualities, baked into it. Curious as to, I know, Akash Dentsu is really one of the first coming out with the attention economy. And you guys, this has been, I'm saying it now, you're hearing a lot, but you guys have been really knee deep in it. How are you really talking to your brands, and what are you seeing as like expectations of how you're thinking about measuring this?
Yeah. It's a lot of what you described, everything from panel-based eyeball tracking and different for digital. I think it's going to evolve. I think we're at relatively early stages. There's a lot of room to go. It's going to be different for different types of engagement, right? So if you're sitting on your couch watching CTV, eyeball tracking is the kind of thing that can happen. It can only happen at the panel level with consent. It's not going to happen at scale. With this digital, I think the kind of things you mentioned, whether it's mobile or computer, I'm really excited about where we're headed into kind of the Web3 and the sort of VR environment. That opens up a whole new types of attention. And to one extent, I've been worried of the amount of advertising opportunity there and the fight for attention, but I think it'll be a lot more measurable because it's a digital environment, and one can look at how long should we actually looking at the ad, like that's doable. So right. I think a lot of room to go, but it's the things you mentioned.
Yes. Cool. Anything you'd like to add, Ivy, on that?
No, I think what Kash said about VR, I think that's as new technology evolves, there will be new things that come out where we are able to advertise, and then where we can really, really, really engage with the user and measure engagement versus just someone seeing an ad. So I'm excited about all of the different technologies that are coming out, and then it just gives us more opportunity to advertise.
This was awesome. Well, thank you so much. I want to be mindful we're running up on time. Akash, Ivy, thank you so much. And Ivy, I totally didn't even just call out your fun fact about you love spicier, hotter food that you could ever get. So that's fun, interesting about Ivy, even though she ran a marathon too in New York. So, that's pretty incredible. But thank you, Ivy, for your contribution and being a part of this, and excited to be partners with you as you support kind of moving the industry forward in a cookieless future. Same with you, Akash. Thanks for your continued support and taking the time today. I hope Ashwini, that, the forays and the team, everyone thought it was valuable and learned a little bit, and I'll kick it back to you.
Yeah. So Phil, first off, thank you for such a fabulous and engaging session. Akash, Ivy, everything that you shared I know people were really lapping it up because the questions are still flowing in. I didn't get a chance to ask my question about how we think contextual may evolve in the gaming and metaverse scenarios, but probably webinar part 2, when we have it later on, we could start off there. But I definitely want to thank all 3 of you for a fantastic discussion. Contextual, for those of us who've been around for a while, used to be boring,
Yes.
right? At this point, it has become the theme of how you
Yeah.
can really curate and not manipulate, but curate and really figure out the areas where you could explore further, bringing in data, bringing in creative, bringing in insights. So it's a space to watch for sure.
Thank you so much, Ashwini. Really appreciate it. And you're right. We didn't even get into the in-gaming and all of that great momentum.
Yeah.
If anyone has questions from us at GumGum, definitely you can find us. I'm sure there's links to all of that, and I'm sure Akash and Ivy as well. This was
Perfect.
awesome.
Thank you so much. Super fun.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
All right.
Have a good one. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.